Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different, so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Good afternoon, folks. This is Steve Moore. This is the More Money Show on WABC, the number one talk radio station in these United States of America. It is a wonderful, wonderful pleasure for me to be in front of this microphone. We're on every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m., and we are live and in color. And I bet you can go to almost any other station that you can find on the radio, and you are not going to find interesting live coverage. In fact, what you're going to get is a lot of infomercials on the weekend. Not on WABC. We have live coverage of what is going on in America. And one of the reasons I wanted to come on live, every once in a while, I'll tape the show in advance. But since the election, every weekend we've been doing live because I need to hear from you. This is an interactive radio show. It is a show where I learn so much from listening to you all, my audience. And we have great ratings. So thank you so much for making this show a success. But I believe in the wisdom of my listeners. And I boast to everybody, even my friends who have other radio shows. I said, I bet you don't have a smarter radio audience as I do. And I know that to be true because I do take your calls often, which I will today, by the way. I'm going to write down right now. I'm going to give you the More Money hotline, 1-800-848-9222. Don't call in yet. We'll start taking calls probably bottom of the hour because we have Scott Walker, the great former governor of Wisconsin, who is going to tell us what is going on in that state and the crazy decision by the courts to overturn his labor reforms, which it's just an outrageous story. So you have to hear this, folks. But 1-800-848-9222 is the hotline number. And we've done this for 3 weeks in a row. And I think we'll do a little bit more of it this week of ask you, what advice do you have for the DOGE committee? What do you think should be done about government waste and overregulation? And where can we save money? Where can we raise money? I'm in favor of the garage sale, a massive multi-billion-dollar federal garage sale all over the country because we have federal offices and buildings and assets all over the country. And we sell them off, auction them off, and see how much money we can raise, and then use that money that we raise to retire some of our $36 trillion obscene and obese debt. And so I've learned a lot from you in the last few weeks. And by the way, I keep channeling this stuff over to the DOGE committee, and they're quite receptive to the ideas. And some of them I've heard about already, but many of them are really good. One of the ones I really like, by the way, is this idea, and one of our callers called in a week or two ago about this, and I had been thinking about this myself, so I guess great minds think alike, but the idea of why don't we have a reward system for federal employees and federal agency heads who can tell us how we can save money in their agency? So, you've got $100 million agencies that with vast, amounts of resources and employees and a lot of missions that probably aren't necessary. And who knows better where the waste is than the people who run the programs? So let's say that a federal manager or a federal employee comes up with an idea that saves the government, $5 million. That's a lot of money, $5 million. And then we give that, we give a reward to that federal manager, maybe $25,000 or $50,000 for saving the taxpayers $5 million. And that seems, incentives matter in life, and give the federal employees and the federal managers and the contractors the opportunity to tell us how we can, and they have to actually, it has to work. In other words, they have to show where we can save the money. We have to implement it. And once we do, and if we save the money, then they get maybe a $25,000 or $50,000 bonus, because money does talk. And so we're going to get into that. But before we do, in my opening minutes of the show, I want to remind everyone that this is December 7th. I believe it is. Is this December 7th? Yes, this is December 7th. I wanted to make double sure. So this is a day that lives in infamy. And I am not of the World War II generation, but my parents sure were. And every December 7, we paid homage to that day. It was a terrible day. Of course, for those youngsters who don't know what December 7th is, that was the day that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. It wasn't the Germans, as John Belushi said, it was the Japanese. And I remember talking to when I was growing up, both my mom and dad were of that generation, and that was the day that changed America. And it changed their lives profoundly, much more so than even, say, 9/11 did in our lives. And their whole lives were uprooted. My mother had 3 brothers about her same age. She was 17 at the time that the bombing occurred. And within 9 months, her 3 brothers were gone. Her family was never really unified again. They were off either in the Pacific or in the German Europe region to fight the fascists and win. And this was, ladies and gentlemen, there was no doubt in my mind, the greatest generation. What they did, and by the way, if you haven't watched the HBO specials on both A Band of Brothers and the Pacific, you should do it. And you should have your kids watch it. Young people don't know about this. They're not taught about the valor of that generation and and by the way, I'll bet we have, it would be cool if we had any listeners, maybe we do, that actually fought in World War II. I mean, if you did, you're probably in your mid to late 90s. But my dad did. My dad was over in the Pacific on warships, and thank God he survived and came back and had 5 kids. But he never talked about the war, by the way, never did. Only when he was around his buddies who fought in the war did they ever talk about it. They did their job. They defeated the Japanese, they defeated the Nazis, and then they came home and they rebuilt the American economy. And it was an incredible generation. And why aren't we talking more about December 7th? I mean, we have liberals who want to talk more about Hiroshima Day than they want to talk about when the Japanese killed Americans in Hawaii. So if anybody is listening to the show and you have any personal remembrances of this, or if you have any stories from your parents, we'd love to hear them. We should really not celebrate this day, because it's not a day of celebration, but we should mark it off as one of the most important days in American history. And thank God we won. And it's freedom, and it was our strong defense and our great minds that defeated the evil forces of that time. So December 7, 1941, a day that will live in infamy. And here we are. Let me see if I can do the math here. 80 some years later, and we don't really talk about it. So I'm talking about it, folks, because I really am saluting all of the people. We lost, I believe it was 500,000 lives. Now, somebody might want to look that up, but I think that's the number of lives that were lost among Americans. So let's when we say our prayers tonight, let's remember the great people who kept us free. I wanted to also make one last point before we go to break. and bring on my first guest, Scott Walker, the former governor of Wisconsin and a smart guy. He runs Young America Foundation. I love the guy. I wrote my column last week on the need for a new patriotism. And I was talking about this with my buddy Larry Kudlow, who comes on before my show. And the point of my piece was that this is a great country and it is the greatest country. And that's something 75% of Americans agree with. And the only people who don't agree with it are people that write our textbooks in American history, that blame America for all the problems. The super highly educated people, what I call the overeducated people who have advanced degrees, they tend to not think, and by the way, liberals, progressives do not think America is a great country. All they want to talk about is slavery and segregation and, the Indians and so on. And look, we have stains in our past. There's no doubt about it. We're human beings. We're not infallible, of course. But all they do is dwell on our shortcomings. And yet, the amazing things about America, they never talk about. Well, I want to talk about that. And I want Trump, when he gives his inauguration speech, to try to unify the country around this idea of a new patriotism, a new love of country. And let's burn these textbooks that try to educate our kids about how terrible America is. I mean, we've allowed the left and the progressive to write these textbooks. You should read the American history textbooks, folks. I mean, they literally start off, one of them started off, some people think America is a great country, but it's not a great country because we have racism and sexism and thisism and thatism. I mean, what country does that? So we have to teach this generation and the next generation of Americans about our history and our proud history, mostly proud history. We don't do that. I don't understand why. And it makes me angry, frankly. So we got a lot to talk about. I'm going to bring on Scott Walker in a few minutes. And then after that, we're going to hopefully hear from you about two things. What do you think about December 7, 1941? And also, what do you think that we can be doing to save more money in Washington? And we could take calls for 25 hours nonstop and get, because I know we've already got people calling in. This is awesome. I have so much fun. I haven't stopped smiling, folks, for the last 3.5 weeks. I am so excited about what is to come for our country, and I hope you are too. This is the More Money Show on WABC, and we will be right back.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Boy, we have a busy show today. We have some great guests. I always say I'm not a very good radio talk show host, but I get some of the best guests. And our next guest coming up in just 1 minute is the great Scott Walker. You remember Scott Walker. He was the governor of Wisconsin. He was the one who really reformed that state in so many ways and cut the budget, got rid of the deficits, really made Wisconsin great again, if I may. And he is in the news now for a reason I'll mention in a few minutes. But first of all, let me introduce Governor Scott Walker. Governor, thank you so much for joining on this Saturday afternoon.
Hey, it's great to be with you again. Good to see you just a day ago. So it's awesome to be connected.
We were in Florida together and had a conference and had a great time chatting. A lot of things I want to ask you about, Governor, but one of them, I was telling my listeners earlier that today is December 7th. Right. A day that will live in infamy. And I'm going to ask my listeners today about any remembrance, if anyone's old enough to actually have lived through December 7, 1941. I'm not, but my parents talked about it all the time. I wonder about if you have any thoughts about this.
Well, absolutely. My mom was born December 30th, 1938. So she was just a young child, but she talks about my parents, her parents, my grandparents, and particularly I've got a pair of boots that my uncle Warren wore in the war. He was in the Pacific Theater and then eventually made his way back and bought a motorcycle and rode that motorcycle with those boots. So they're in my office, both out of reverence to him and because we were the only two in our family who rode motorcycles. But also I posted today on the USS Arizona Memorial. One of the names there is Walter Bovio. I grew up in a small town in south central Wisconsin called Delavan. And Walter Bovio was a 19-year-old from my town of Delavan who was on the Arizona that day and who is forever entombed with his fellow sailors on that ship below the water there. So it's just very real to me because his name was on the side of our American Legion post.
You know, I was saying earlier on the show that we need a new patriotism in America, a new love of country. And you were the governor of Wisconsin, but I don't know if you've read these new American history textbooks, but they do not celebrate America. In fact, you know, you read these textbooks now. I don't know why we allow this in the classroom. All they do is attack America as sort of responsible for all the problems in the world. And I mean, we know that we have stains in our history just like any country, but you and I think most of our listeners do believe that this is the greatest country on earth. And why is it that the left seems to want to highlight our failings rather than our successes?
Well, I think it's the work I do at Young America's Foundation with college, high school, and now middle school kids. We see it all the time. It's one of the biggest frustrations, but I think it's because it goes back to Marxism. Our country is built on freedom. We're the only country that's lasted as long as we have, nearly 250 years coming up on our anniversary in a year and a half, and a country based on the idea that all of us are created equal, that our creator, not our government, not the king, not a monarch, but that God gives us these rights. And that while we didn't always live up to that fully, we've been on the path towards a more perfect nation throughout this great history of this country. And that should be celebrated. We should teach the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, we should know about the parts you referenced where some of our leaders didn't live up to that promise made on July 4th, 1776, but we've been on that path. I think that's part of the challenge, but it's Marxists who years ago wanted to pit us one against the other based on class or income. That's how they've prevailed elsewhere in the world and then failed. In America, that doesn't work because anyone can live the American dream. So now it's based on race and sex and gender, and that's why they have to go in the textbooks and in the classrooms and claim somehow these awful, horrible things about the country, when this country, not only here for people here in America, but think about the freedom and opportunity that American style capitalism has brought to the world.
Yes. Well, I couldn't agree more. Well said, Governor. And I did watch the Reagan movie just a couple of weeks ago, which I very much liked. And, I wanted to bring that up because I forgot to mention that you, of course, run the fantastic Young America's Foundation, which is a wonderful organization, and people should support that if you don't already. I'm sure a lot of our listeners do. But you own the Reagan Ranch, and you have turned that into an incredible monument to Ronald Reagan. But those scenes in the movie, were they actually taken at the Reagan Ranch, Governor?
They were. I was right there. I was standing behind the oak tree up by the front by the ranch house. You've been a longtime speaker for us at Free Enterprise events and know about the ranch.
I've been there many times.
I was standing there when Penelope Ann Miller, who portrayed Mrs. Reagan, came out of the ranch house, and I said to Andrew Kaufman, our director, "Wow, that's a powerful moment." And when I saw it in the movie, it was even more powerful than I remembered. And I just such a wonderful, wonderful one that they did it, but two, that they did a really accurate portrayal of the president, the first lady, and the team around him. And that it did so well, for all the hype and hysteria on the left. In the end, America wanted to see that story. And just recently, when it came out streaming and on DVD and Blu-ray, it actually was one of the top movies in America. So
I know. Really that's what we did. We streamed it about 2 weeks ago, and it was, I think when I streamed it 2 weeks ago, it was number one of all the movies. Absolutely. And by the way, I love the fact that I have great remembrances of going to the foundation to the ranch, and there's that one thing that I found so interesting, which was the bed. Is that the same bed that they actually slept in? Yeah. And that bed had, Reagan was what? How tall was it? About 6'4". He was a tall man, maybe 6'3", 6'4". And the bed, if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was too short. His legs were, and there's like an extension, a little stool extension on the bed. And I'm thinking, totally right. This is the most powerful man in the. What's that?
It mesmerizes not only people like you and I who remember President Reagan, but these students are so impressed. You think, what do they care about a guy who was, died long after they were even, or long before they were born? but they come and they see this was a real guy. He was just like our parents and grandparents. He lived what he talked about, frugality. Yeah. He zip-tied the two beds together, put the wood bench at the end of the bed because his feet hung off the end. He just lived it. And in turn, these kids then they ultimately want to read more about and go online and watch videos of Ronald Reagan and hear what he was talking about. And one of the most important things in his farewell address, you were just talking about this, he warned us that even though we got our spirit back and our patriotism back, we had to reinstitutionalize it. And he talked about learning American history and shared civic values, shared civic rituals. And that's exactly what we're missing in so many parts of society today.
So that's a good lead in to the original reason I asked you to come on. I have so much to talk to you about this afternoon. But you've been in the news a lot lately because, of course, you were the heroic governor who really took on some of the militant public unions in Wisconsin. And I don't even remember how long ago that was. I mean, it was in the 90s, I guess it was. I'm losing track of time. But the fact is that this was an incredibly important reform. You were so courageous in doing that. I think the first governor who really took on the public sector unions. And look, I'm not against unions, but I think some of these public sector unions are out of control. And now the courts have basically, and by the way, if you wouldn't mind mentioning the insurrection that happened in Madison, Wisconsin when you did that. And now I learned from the Wall Street Journal that the courts in Wisconsin have overturned those reforms.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So it's been the rule of law for 13 years. It's been upheld in state and federal court time and time again. So it is settled case law. And yet they were just waiting. They tried to intimidate us when I first brought this up. It wasn't a few hundred. It wasn't a few thousand. It was 100,000 protesters occupied our Capitol for nearly a month. So obviously
So hold on, time out, Governor, because this is a very important point you're making. And I want to make sure every one of my listeners understands what you're saying, because I remember this happening, that you had, because people talk about the quote insurrection that happened at the U.S. Capitol, and yet your Capitol was sieged by these protesters, not for a few hours, but days. Was it weeks? I don't even remember.
But it was almost a month. Yeah, it was just shy of a month.
Yeah. Why didn't they call that an insurrection?
Well, and I remember I used to, instead of coming in the Capitol, I had to come in through the Justice Center under a tunnel underneath, and I'd go maybe a quarter mile across all this SWAT gear from all the law enforcement agencies in and around the state that had to come and help eventually take the Capitol back. But that's just how. Remember, it was Pelosi. What a distorted memory she has. Pelosi was actually on then Twitter saying, power to the unions,
power to the people.
Hold the Capitol down. I mean, they were against. They were for occupying capitals before they were against it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, you were exactly. Well, you were heroic, and your life was in danger. I know there were many death threats, but so can you explain to my listeners, Governor, what exactly those reforms were? Because they seem very commonsensical to me.
Yeah, they went wild mainly because we took the power out of the hands of the big government union bosses and put it simply back into the hands of the hardworking people, the state, the taxpayers, and the people that they duly elect. So collective bargaining, which ironically started in Wisconsin eons ago, the last century, was really, as it is elsewhere across the country, it takes power out of hands of school board members and city council members and county board members and others because the unions get to call the shots. We stopped that. We pulled back on that. That's why they went just over the top, out of control on this. And then that's why they sent the protesters in, because they were trying to intimidate first me and then the legislature. We didn't back down. Then they tried to recall us. I was the first governor in American history to win a recall election.
Oh, I remember.
Then
yes.
They went to court. And when that failed, each step of the way, the left, remember, I was passing this on to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to remember, the left never stops. So don't just assume because we won that we can do this.
That's so
Get
true.
ready for the courts. Get ready for all the administrative state. That's what happened to us, and that's what's going to happen to them in Washington.
So where do you go from here now? You've got this court that's overturned your reforms, but everyone I talked to in Wisconsin says they want these, because how much money did you save?
according to the MacIver Institute, one of the local think tanks, they projected originally over $16 billion. They just updated that this past year over $30 billion in counting.
For a state like Wisconsin, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money for sure. And if you privately talk to school board members in particular across the state, liberal or conservative alike, they'll tell you they'll be devastated if our Act 10 reforms go away. And so this judge, political payoff in Madison, the most liberal county in the state, signed the recall petition, didn't recuse himself. He overturns it largely because the state Supreme Court last year, remember, changed from a 4-3 conservative majority to a 4-3 liberal majority. Wow. Ultimately, it'll get appealed and then all the way up to the state of Wisconsin Supreme Court. And this spring in April, there is an election. One of the 4 liberals is retiring. And the key here is if Brad Schimel, the former attorney general, now a judge himself, if he is elected, the rule of law will be protected. If one of these liberal activists, like the last 3, is elected, not only is Act 10, our reforms we're just talking about, likely to go, but even things like school choice, the voucher program that's been around for more than 30 years, voter ID requirements I signed into law, a lot of really awful things. So people across the country should pay attention to this race and particularly pay attention to Brad Schimel.
So we've just got about 45 seconds left before we have a hard break. So, Governor, one last question on the fly. I believe that I think that something very suspicious happened in that U.S. Senate race in Wisconsin. I was told that over 100,000 voters did same-day registration in Wisconsin. I don't think they had the right safeguards to make sure they were, truly eligible voters. And the Republican lost that race by a hair. What is your thought about that race?
Eric Hubdy would have been a fabulous U.S. Senator. Well, it goes back. It actually ties these two issues together. It's why we need to have not only a court that upholds the law, a Supreme Court, a high court that does that. So you have at a minimum voter ID. But then going forward, we need a governor and a legislature that can further tighten and ensure voter integrity. Because we see it in Wisconsin and all across the country in the battleground states, there's always problems, and we need to have elections where everybody, Republican and Democrat, anywhere in between, can have faith in the system.
Thank you, Governor. That was Governor Scott Walker, the former governor of Wisconsin, who now runs the Young America's Foundation. Governor, thank you so much for your time this Saturday afternoon. We'll be right back with Steve Bannon, the political pro who created the entire Trump phenomenon.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC, the number 1 talk radio station in these United States. I told you that we had an all-star lineup today, and I wasn't lying to you. Next up, we have one of my heroes, Steve Bannon. Without Steve Bannon, Donald Trump never would have been president in his first term when he first started running for president. I think Steve, excuse me, I think you were one of the people who realized very early on, probably the earliest person of consequence, that said Donald Trump could be the next president of the United States.
Well, thank you for the kind words, but as you know, Steve, Donald Trump's he's responsible for the phenomenon when he came down the steps. But no, I've been at this populist ever since 2008 in the financial crash, because I said, hey, just being a student of history, every financial crash has always been followed by a populist reaction.
So I'd love to get into how because I remember when Donald Trump said he was running for president, and please don't tell the president I said this, but I almost fell off my chair laughing. I really did, Steve. I thought, this is a joke. This is a publicity stunt. But you saw something in this guy. And by the way, I love Donald Trump. And when you lined up that meeting, when we first met with Trump, I walked out of that room was just amazed by the man. But what was it? I mean, you saw this before anybody else did.
Well, I said the financial crash of 2008 and how the bailouts were handled. You saw that, and then I started going. I started looking. I really wanted Sarah Palin to run, and she did in 12. And so we were looking for Lou Dobbs or somebody that would be a populist nationalist.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I saw at CPAC, I saw Trump, and then Dave Bossie, a friend of yours, invited me up to New Hampshire in May of 2014. I went up there and saw President Trump. At the time, they had a cattle call for for all the candidates. Trying to get the early people that work on the campaigns. New Hampshire's so important. And Trump was up there. He had Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, and he had all these candidates, 20 of them, and Trump talked a vernacular that was not a Republican vernacular, but people leaned into that talk. I was standing in the back. I said, he's off the top of the head. He doesn't have a script, but these are not the typical talking points you hear a lot of times on Fox. It's very different. It's very populist. And from that time forward, I knew Ailes very much. And Steve, you should know that Roger Ailes, one of the smartest guys I ever met, in particular media, who told me the entire time. Yeah. I said, Steve, he's doing this to negotiate a better deal on The Apprentice. He's going to hold NBC up. This is not real. He's not going to stick it out. I go, I don't know, Roger. I think this guy's got it.
So, by the way, you have a show that you do, War Room. How do people get War Room?
Just the easiest way is warroom.org. We're on Real America's Voice, 10 to noon Eastern time every day, and then 5 to 7, and Saturday mornings 10 to noon. So we're 6 days a week, but just Google it, warroom.org, or just go to Real America's Voice. We're on podcasts. We're everywhere. We're ubiquitous, and we're free. So it's
I've been a guest on your show many times. So tell for people who are not familiar with War Room, and I know most of my listeners are, but tell them what is the show about? What is the purpose of the show?
The purpose is to walk a working class and middle class audience through capital markets, the economy, how it ties to politics, geopolitics. Today, live, we talked about Notre Dame, Trump, Ukraine, Syria, tied it back to capital markets, the debt, all of it. But, Steve, I got to ask you a question. You're the only major contributor that comes on. We have Scott Bessent. We have Peter Navarro. We got a whole host of guys that is not going in the White House right now as an economic advisor. Can I break some news now? I know you're talking to people. Can we break news about you stepping into the administration?
Well, the fact is, I would obviously do anything this president asked me to do, unless it was a Senate confirmation job. I've been through that. But look, I love this president. I'm so excited about what is happening to our country right now. And, I really wanted have you on because I wanted to ask you, what do you see coming now? I mean, he had a fabulous first term. He would have been overwhelmingly reelected had it not been for COVID. And now he's coming back. It truly is one of the greatest comeback stories in American political history. Is it going to be better in the second term than the first term?
Well, I think first of all, let's take 3 lines of work, which I think are the major 3 lines. Number one, the beginning stages of the kinetic part of the Third World War. You can see that in Ukraine today and in Syria. The second is the debt, the deficit, but this crushing debt, and now even personal debt, you can say. And the third is the invasion of the southern border, 15 million people. Let's do all 3 of them. These people are trying to jam him up. And the central thing we have to get sorted is you have to get sorted the debt and the deficit. Remember, we hit the debt ceiling is hit on January 2nd. That's where the deal with McCarthy comes off. So we are technically with the debt ceiling on January 2nd. You've got the CR, the budget he's going to kick into next year. Talk about reconciliation. We're going to do the border first, they say. Then we're going to do the tax cuts. So you got the tax cuts revert in April. That's got to get done. You've got the budget, and we got to get a budget, even with the Doge guys. And I realize, they've got some big picture ideas about deconstructing administrative state, but just the basic, we don't have a budget for this year. We don't have appropriations. We can't have, as you know, Steve, another $1.5 trillion or $2 trillion deficit. That we're adding $1 trillion every 100 days. To me, that is the thing the president's got to get his hands on the quickest, even with the deportations and the war. Yeah. If we don't get our hands around this debt and the adding to the debt so rapidly, it's going to blow the country up. And the government of France fell yesterday, first time since 1962, over what? They're at 6% deficit percentage to GDP. They got to make cuts. The cuts come back on the working class and middle class. Le Pen and the populist nationalists say no. It's got to come out of foreign monies overseas. There's a huge fight. The government falls. You saw Liz Truss and really Rishi Sunak get blown up by the Labor Party for the same exact thing. Budget, and now you've seen the Labor Party's only been in a couple of months. There's got 3 million signatures already. They want another election. Yeah, this whole thing of this massive amount of debt globally in each country, and now personal debt credit card debt, that we're going to have a global margin call on this debt, and that's the thing that President Trump's got to get his hands around first.
Well, that's something that is, as an economist, that's what's keeping me up at night, is the threat of a revolt against government debt, and that could drive interest rates way up, and it would be, we continue to add to that debt. And by the way, I wrote a column this week. It hasn't appeared yet, Steve, but what you were just saying, and I'm just going to give you the premise of the piece, and then I'd like your reaction to it. And the title of the piece is called "Trumpism is Going to Go Global." And if you look at what's happening in Germany today, and if you look at what's happening, you mentioned what's happening in Britain with the political unrest there. South Korea has martial law. You've got the situation in Japan where they overrode the sitting government for the first time in 50 years. I could go on and on. France, look what happened in Paris just this past week, where they ousted the prime minister. My premise is that the people of the world are looking at what happened with this citizen revolt in America, and they say I think citizens around the world want Trumpism in their own country.
It's a great premise. I think you're 100% correct. Let me add to this, since we're the tip of the spear of that, it's how you actually apply Trumpism. Look at Doge. You got some of the most brilliant entrepreneurs in the history of this country that are trying to do the practical work of deconstructing the administrative state, principally not just for the deregulation, just the cost of it. They go up on Capitol Hill, and the Democrats are fighting them tooth and nail already. Everywhere throughout the world, the little guy is sitting there going, hey, I finally get it. Government spending is a poison. Right. It's not a remedy. It's a poison. We need to get these bureaucrats and these deep state guys, administrative state, under control, whatever the country is. This is why France, the government just fell. The question is going to be for us right now, how is that to be done? How do we get this thing? They have treated this with such a breach of fiduciary obligation on both sides.
Yes.
That now we're going to get into a situation. It's $1 trillion every 100 days. Steve, this is what's embedding inflation. People said for years, Steve, you talk about deficits that nobody cares. I said they're going to care when it's embedded into inflation, and that's what we got now, because the refinancing, you got to refinance 1/3 of the $36 trillion every year. That's what's killing us. Steve, this is the test of Trumpism. It's the test of populist nationalism.
Yes.
It's going to see the first 100 days.
So I couldn't agree more, and so now you mentioned by the way, you recognize that voice, folks. That is Steve Bannon, who was the mastermind of the whole Trump revolution that first began in late 2015. So you mentioned the fact that they have a debt ceiling vote. I think you said it's coming up either in December or January. What is the strategy if Steve Bannon is running the show? How do we deal with this debt ceiling? What should Republicans be asking for? What should Trump do?
The McCarthy deal had a duration to it, not a number. This is why Biden was able to spend. This is one of the reasons.
That's right. We gave him a blank check.
The blank check. So the duration ends, I think, on January 3rd, because they wanted it not to be on the basically a national discussion at the general election, which we should have. My recommendation, and Russ votes perfectly this, we did this back in 2017. He's got to be working on something right now that does waterfalls. We got to figure out how you can pay for the cash coming in, how you pay the interest, how you pay the face amount as you turn the debt over, so there's no chance of default. At the same time, I believe you have to merge the Doge movement into the appropriations process.
Yes, I like that.
Doge is not constitutional. Only the legislative branch can actually, as you know, increase taxes or cut or actually appropriate. They're correct, and we don't need to fight that fight, because here's why: the new impoundment, what Russ Vought and Mark Paoletta and Jeff Clark have come up with on these papers about impoundment, more is close what you and I have been arguing forever. The number in the appropriations number you pass, the budget you pass, that's a ceiling. It ain't the floor. Right, you can go in and impound money. So I think you merge Doge with OMB into the appropriations process. While we're doing that and going to have significant and major cuts coming, what you do is you get a waterfall that OMB and Russ does a waterfall, and so we take the pressure off. You don't have to, you don't have a debt vote right away. You merge that all into one thing, and you have a big showdown. You get the reconciliation done first with the border and the border wall security, deportations, and then sometime in the spring, coupled with the taxes, It's all of a piece. You can look at debt. You can look at taxes. You can look at, as you and Larry have been arguing, and Scott Bessent, the last chance for a supply side cut, because we have one chance here to do it. You put it all in one package. You take it before the American people, and we have an up or down vote, and let's get on with it.
So, Steve, one of the things I've looked at the autopsy reports on the election that just was held 3 weeks ago. I'm sure you've looked at those numbers even more closely than I have. But I found what was so interesting about what happened in November was that it was a middle class revolt. There's no question, and it wasn't just whites. It was Hispanics. It was Asians. It was every income class except for rich people. really, all your rich friends from the Ivy Leagues. You know, they're the only ones who were into Bidenomics. But this is this is a change in the Republican Party. I mean, back, I was fortunate enough to serve with Ronald Reagan in his last year in office, and I'm so proud of that. But back then, the Republican Party was kind of the party of the rich, frankly. I mean, if the wealthier the county, the more likely it was to vote for Republicans. But that's not the case today. It's the most amazing political metamorphosis I've ever seen. I mean, now although I would go to the rich areas when I was campaigning, and all the rich areas was Kamala, and then you go to working class towns, it was Trump.
It's the credentialed class. The Democratic Party is a group of billionaires or Wall Street oligarchs.
Yes.
It's a credentialed class. The people people have degrees, multiple degrees, and then a substrate of really incredibly poor people. The populace, the middle class and working class, that's the Republican Party. It's been transformed. It's really MAGA.
Yes, it has.
Now here's where let me go back to those taxes, because you remember, Steve. And by the way, Steve Moore's like a brother to me, and so is Larry. But there are some things we disagree on. Like back in 2017,
I knew this is going to come up. All right, I'm bracing myself, Steve.
You
want to raise taxes on the rich, don't you?
I want to raise taxes on the rich. Nothing more. Not that I want to gouge the rich. I think it's an incentive to get the rich, like you said. They're all Kamala Harris voters. All the big government guys happen to be rich. I want to get their attention. If you keep on this, guys, somebody's going to pay for it. You're going to have to pay for it. I think as soon as the wake-up call that the top bracket increases to 50%, they're going to sit there and go, well, hang on. What are we actually paying for? We need to get people's attention, because the federal spending, as you said for years, the federal spending is going to bury us. And we just can't afford $1 trillion to $2 trillion annual deficits, not even counting the interest charges on this. So I think we're coming to that moment in this spring to have a national conversation on debt, deficits, federal spending, the administrative state, and taxes. We wrap it all into one thing, and we have a national conversation on this. And I got to tell you, I think the next 6 months are going to be the most important 6 months in American politics.
I couldn't agree more. I'm with you on everything except raising the tax rates, but everything else I completely agree with. Now, we've only got a couple minutes left, and I want to completely change directions, because I think I'm pretty sure, Steve, that you did serve in our military, did you not?
Yes, sir. I was 8 years. I was a naval officer.
8 years. I knew that. So this is December 7th. And I don't hear a lot of talk about December 7th. My parents used to talk about December 7th, 1941 all the time. They were of that World War II generation. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts about this. Why do we not?
I started War Room today at 10 o'clock as we do every December 7th. I went back to the original announcement, the original New York Philharmonic playing in Texaco, and the announcer cut in and said, Pearl Harbor, the football game, I think the Chicago Bears. What we did today, I played all the footage, and I played the announcers. I played Roosevelt's speech that he gave on December 8th to declare
a day of infamy.
And then I finished with Syria and with Ukraine, the current battles going on there. And I told people, I said, look, in December 7th of 1941, the Japanese had invaded Manchuria on mainland in 1935. The Spanish Civil War was in 1936. In 1938, you had Munich. In 1939, you had Poland. In 1940, you had the fall of France, and you had the Blitz over London. In 1941, you had the Russian. In June of 1941, you had the German army backstab Russia and invade Russia.
And we did nothing. I mean, Steve, we're up against a hard break, but I'm so glad that you are alerting your viewers to that important break, because nobody in the mainstream media even brings it up anymore. That is the great Steve Bannon. I appreciate so much your time this afternoon, Steve. This is the More Money Show.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. We are in our second hour now. We had a great first hour with Governor Scott Walker, the former governor of Wisconsin, and we also had on the great Steve Bannon, who was the original Trump economic and political advisor and helped create the whole Trump movement. And so that was a fascinating conversation, but we've got a great hour coming up. Mostly in this hour, I'm going to be taking your calls. Mostly. We are live. We're in color. You know, you can turn on all these other boring stations. You're not going to get any interesting programming. I can guarantee you it's going to be infomercials. We are mostly live most Saturdays, not all Saturdays. Sometimes we tape the show in advance, but today we are live, just like we've been in every Saturday since the election, because there's so much going on and because I value your advice. I like to put my listeners to work, and you've called in over the last 2 or 3 weeks with wonderful ideas about how we can save money. I'm passing those ideas on to the people at the Department of Government Efficiency. That's the DOGE Commission, which is, of course, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. We have to save hundreds of billions of dollars. And we've gotten amazing, amazing ideas from our very smart audience. And so thank you all for calling in. And by the way, the lines have been just lit up. And I love that because you're all engaged in this. This is the fight of our time against wasteful, inefficient, duplicative, and fraudulent government. We have to trim it. And that's why Trump won. This is December 7th. For those of you just joining, you know that this is, as FDR put it, a day that will live in infamy. It was the day, of course, that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. I have to say that because the major media doesn't cover this anymore. The schools don't cover it. I mean, I think the schools think that the wrong side won World War II. My father and my 2 uncles fought in World War II very valiantly. And then they came back home after the war was over and got back to business. It was the greatest generation. And for those of us who have parents, or if there's anybody who, there may be a few people listening to this show, it's kind of amazing to think about that fought in World War II and are still alive. If they are, they're probably in their mid to late 90s. But I salute all the people who wear the uniform. By the way, Steve Bannon served 7 years in our military, and those are heroes to me. So we have got to celebrate America. We have to celebrate the fact that we are the greatest country on earth. I know a lot of my liberal friends don't believe that, but I know you do, or else you probably wouldn't be listening to this show. I want to take a few callers, and then we're going to have a little political discussion with my good friend Tom Del Beccaro. So let me start. I think, Mr. Producer, we have Lauren on the line. Lauren, are you there?
I am, Steve. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for calling in. Before you tell us how to cut the government, can you tell me anything about do you have any remembrance or your parents talk about December 7th at all? Did we lose Lauren? Okay, let's go to Sue. Sue, are you still there? Hi.
Yes, I am. Love the show. Listen every week to you and Larry.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I love it. I learned a lot from you guys. All the guys ran to enlist on December 7th, 1941, and my father was one of them. He was a pilot in the Army Air Corps. He flew a B-17 Flying Fortress and got the Flying Cross, and my mother worked making warheads at a place called Weatherhead in Cleveland. So,
You have it in your blood. I mean, it is amazing. Yeah. By the way, was your father in the Pacific or the Atlantic region?
He said that he flew with the Blue Men of Morocco, whatever. I don't know. I remember
that would have been the Atlantic region, and that's amazing. Yeah, what a hero! I mean, you must have been so proud of your father.
Absolutely, he has quite a few medals to his credit. But
oh my God!
Yeah. So
when did he die? How long ago did he die?
He died in 2001. It was right after 9/11. He was 79.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's so great that, we all, for those of us who have parents who really, they stepped up in a way that I don't know if this generation could do that in the way that generation did. But what do you think about what do you think about DOGE? And what do you think, Sue, about how we can cut government spending?
Well, I was a data analyst for the majority of my career, and so I think what's important for them to do, as far as what they're doing, I don't have the expertise on that, but what I would like to see them do is to create a progress website or a status website.
Yes.
Have a list of all of the departments that are under review in order of priority, and have something simple like a bar graph showing red, yellow, green percentage of the review that's done, when it's completed, what the presentations are, how much money is to be saved. Yeah. Because if the public sees that, they can help put pressure on to make sure that recommendations are implemented.
I love that. That's a fantastic idea. I'm going to put that in our report. I think it makes sense because, they hate most of these. Most of these agencies cannot pass a simple audit. It's amazing. I mean, we require our businesses to pass an audit, but the agencies don't have to do it.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for the public to see the progress because I think that, we feed off of that information these days. I mean, we're so used to going out there and looking for stuff. And if we see what they're doing, it'll reinforce the rightness of our decision to get this team in place.
Sue, great call. Great comments. That's why I take your all calls because you have such smart things to say. I think we do we still have David on the line? What's that? Okay. Well, folks, I know that we have about 2 or 3 people waiting on the line. I'm going to give you that More Money hotline. Again, 1-800-848-9222. The question of the day is, what would you recommend to cut government spending? I told you earlier on the show, my idea is to have rewards for federal employees who find ways that we could cut spending. And the other one that I'm going to mention right now is let's raise hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars by allowing more drilling on federal lands and then charging the companies royalties for the oil that they bring up and that they sell. I think we could raise tens of billions of dollars by doing that. And then the same thing with minerals. And then, we have more mineral resources than any other country in the world, and yet we have to import our minerals. How stupid is that? Because the environmentalists won't allow us to mine for the lands. And I'm not talking about mining in Yosemite or Yellowstone National Park or near Niagara Falls. I'm talking about lands that are not environmentally sensitive, that we should be mining and getting the resources, whether it's the uranium or the copper or the precious metals that we need. It's absurd and obscene to me that we have to get these resources from China, Russia, Uzbekistan, all these countries I can barely even pronounce their name, when we can get them. And we have so many natural resources in the Western mountains. And that's my idea. And then we charge the companies a royalty and a fee and a tax to get them. They'll make money. We'll make money. We'll create jobs here in America. It seems like a no-brainer to me. Folks, we're going to be right back. This is the More Money Show. Tom Del Beccaro, one of the top political analysts in the country, is going to come on and give us a lay of the land in terms of what's ahead for Donald Trump. And then we will be taking more of your calls on the More Money Show and the More Money hotline. That is 1-800-849. I'm sorry, let me say that again. 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848 WABC. And the question of the day is both. I want to ask you about December 7th, and if you have any remembrances of what happened in 1941, you or your parents, and also what would you do to cut this outrageous government debt and spending that is a cancer cell that's metastasizing on our society. This is the More Money Show. It's WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I am economist Steve Moore. By the way, I wanted to remind you, I should have done this at the outset. My new book is out with Arthur Laffer, the most famous economist in the world. He, by the way, just got back from Argentina, where he was advising Javier Milei about how to bring a revolution about in Argentina, a free market revolution. Boy, did they need it there. So Laffer and I have written a book called The Trump Economic Miracle. It's a great stocking stuffer, and it is a book about what Trump will do when he gets into office, and this will be a miracle. I really believe it is coming. So please get Trump Economic Miracle. You can get it on Amazon. We're number one on business and economics on Amazon, so I'm very proud of that. And then also, please get the our daily newsletter. It is free. I'm not selling you anything here, folks. No Biden inflation here. It is absolutely free. Go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up for what we call the hotline. It is the hottest newsletter in America right now. You can read it in 5 minutes every morning. We'll email it to you for free, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Newt Gingrich, who's a regular on this show, the former Speaker of the House, says it's the first thing that he reads every morning, and some of my other friends say that is their caffeine in the morning to read the hotline when it comes in, and we will email it to you 5 mornings a week for free. Why would you not do this? It's free. It costs you nothing. Go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up for the hotline. I wanted to quickly, before I get to my guest, Tom Del Beccaro, I wanted to quickly go to the telephone line and hear from David. David, thank you for calling in.
Oh, how you doing?
I'm super. How are you? I mean, it's unbelievable. Christmas is around the corner. Donald Trump will be in the White House in a little more than a month. So I have never been doing better. But tell me, David, by the way, do you have any ideas or thoughts about December 7th?
Well, first of all, I put on, Turner Classic Movie to see what movies were on today.
Yeah.
None.
Uh-huh.
None, of course. And I want to talk. My father-in-law joined when he was 16 in 43.
Wow.
Fought at the Battle of Okinawa.
Oh my God. Wow.
How
old did you say he was?
118.
How old was he?
Well, he joined when he was 16, 17, somewhere around there.
That's amazing. Incredible.
And he fought at Okinawa.
And that was a very, very bloody war.
Oh, it was horrible. He was in the Navy, so he was on the picket.
Yeah.
When the kamikazes came, were attacking the picket.
Oh my God!
Because the pickets were around the carriers. So the kamikazes figured that if they take out the pickets, they would have an open way to get to the carriers.
Oh my God!
So and but also people who protest the atomic bomb, the atomic bomb saved 26 million Japanese lives.
And it saved a lot of American lives as well. You're 100% correct. Yes. You're right. Yeah, we would have had to bomb Japan and Tokyo to bits. They were not going to surrender, and the whole country would have been just. It was absolutely the right decision. Thank God Harry Truman made that decision to drop the bomb, because we would have lost at least 100,000 more Americans. And it was a life-saving decision by Harry Truman. And so I'm in full agreement with you. David, great call. Thank you so much. And boy, you must be so proud of your father-in-law. What a hero he was. I want to turn now to Tom Del Beccaro, who is one of the top political analysts. He actually ran the Republican Party in California. Now he has moved back to the East Coast, but he has a fabulous book out called The Lessons of the American Civilization, which I love that book. It has so many great stories in it. Tom, thanks for joining this afternoon.
Steve, thanks so much for having me on. And just listening to that, I sort of talk about the how stoic America was in the beginning and even up through the world wars. Think about a 16 or a 17-year-old back then willing to sacrifice their lives, and yet we talk about safe spaces today.
So no, it's so true, Tom. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you think verbal bullets are bad. Wait till you face real bullets. And you're so correct. And do you have any stories yourself about your family and how it affected, your parents or grandparents? And because my parents used to talk about December 7, 1941 as the date that changed everyone's life.
Well, my father was in World War II, but he served in Oakland, California, at a naval base, a naval hospital called Oak Knoll.
Wow.
And not far from where your wife Ann grew up. But I can't say that my family was particularly hard hit by any of this. We were. My generation was very lucky, so we didn't wind up in either of the wars. But if we can talk a little bit about someone who needs to be sent to a safe space, can we talk about Jerome Powell for a minute?
Yeah. Well, this is really important because Tom and I have been really down on Jerome Powell. He's the one who gave us 9% inflation in 2022. He's the one who let prices go up by about 25% in the last 4 years. So what do you think, Tom, should be done about Jerome Powell? Trump is very serious about potentially firing Jerome Powell. I think he ought to do it, but what say you?
Yeah, absolutely. And what a hypocrite. He's suddenly talking about the national debt, but I didn't hear that. So he made he made three really egregious errors because he thinks that the Federal Reserve should be managing our economy. But that's not what it should be. The economy, right. We should let the markets work. They should create a stable money supply and stop trying to get us to, quote, full employment. So here's his egregious errors.
Yeah.
When COVID comes, and what happens? Spending jumps. He floods the economy with dollars at the same time that the government shut down the economy over 30% for a period of time. If that's not the definition of where inflation starts. So, and he blithely says, Steve, that the printing of money didn't result in inflation, as if money's immune from the laws of economics and the law of demand, right?
Right.
And then he continues to accommodate with Biden's ridiculous Inflation Reduction Act. So for years now, he's been accommodating these $2 trillion deficits instead of saying we shouldn't have spent that money in the first place. Where's Alan Greenspan when you need him?
Right.
And so once all this inflation comes around, what does he think is the only way to do this? Well, to put people out of work. How does he put people out of work to kill demand? He raises interest rates.
Right.
In other words, he's whipsawing the economy. Hard enough for a business investor and companies to match consumer demand in an international market, but they also have to figure out what the Fed's thinking about every quarter, as if that should be their job, right? No, these are all ridiculous things. We need a chairman, by the way. I haven't forgiven the people who kept you off the Federal Reserve Board, and one of them is a U.S. senator. But we need a Federal Reserve who doesn't think its job is to manage the U.S. economy.
Well put. I mean, and by the way, the more they try to manage it, the more they mismanage it. We want the dollar to be as good as gold. I don't know if you've looked into this idea, but my friend Judy Shelton, who I had on the show last week, Tom, has talked about the idea of issuing gold-backed bonds that would hold their value because inflation has reignited in America. And I kind of like that idea, but I wonder what you think.
Well, here's what I think overall. We have $35 trillion in national debt. We have long-term growth rates below 2%. We have $2 trillion deficits. In other words, it may be that the CPI, which isn't equal to inflation, is close to the 2% that they target.
Say they want,
But we are one crisis away from it exploding again.
I know.
We're living on the edge. So one of my favorite lines is Steve Forbes, who you and I know is the expert on monetary policy. One of my favorite lines is imagine if we had clocks that were different hours every day. One day was 25 hours, one day was 23. How would you set up your day? They're doing that to money. So we have to get to a Federal Reserve with you and Kevin Warsh on it, who don't see the job as as managing the economy, but instead
stabilizing
advocate
prices
for good economic policies.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's so true. And by the way, Steve used to talk about the idea of the New York Minute, and is the New York Minute different than the Los Angeles Minute? But you're so right about that. You want something that holds its value. Now, there's a big question, Tom, about whether Trump would have the authority to fire Jerome Powell. His term is up, I think, in about 14 months or 15 months. I don't remember exactly, sometime in early to mid 2026. So the question that's been out there is, should he just wait him out or should he fire him? And I think if he tried to fire him, Jerome Powell said, look, I'm not leaving. If he tries to fire me, so that could cause a bit of a constitutional showdown. But what do you think about that situation?
Well, I think what Trump needs to do is it's all about marketing. When he gets in, he's got to say, look, our goal is to reduce spending. At the same time, we're increasing supply. We're going to reduce the impediments to a strong economy. We're going to cut down the federal government. And we need to know, Jerome Powell, whether you support these policies. And if he says he can't, then Trump should say the best thing you can do for the country is to step aside because of your prior mismanagement, and put the pressure on Powell to either support these rational policies of a government that doesn't run $2 trillion deficits or not.
Oh, that's well put. And I think that's right. And the American people are fed up with the Fed. They make up the rules as they go along. By the way, Time Magazine almost made Jerome Powell their man of the year last year. And if Taylor Swift hadn't been, had such a good year, he might well have been. But I don't understand the accolades for him. I mean, he's been, as you said, he's up and down. I mean, the monetary policies have been like a roller coaster, which is economically destabilizing. And you're right. I think getting somebody like Kevin Warsh in there who will make the dollar strong and stable would be exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah, and you should be on there as well. We need people to understand that if you look at the history, the reason why governments collapse, like the Weimar Republic and others from inflation, is because they had a central bank that printed money. At what point are we going to learn that is not a successful policy during any crisis?
Yes.
And Powell accommodated all of that. He may suddenly have transformed himself into caring about the debt, but that's like an arsonist saying we should stop burning buildings down.
Right. So I'm talking to Tom Del Beccaro, who's one of the top political analysts in the country. He is the author of a new book called The Lessons of the American Civilization, which is a fantastic book. And Tom, just in the 2 minutes we have left before we have to take a break, I wanted to ask you about you were the chair of the Republican Party for many years in California. Is Gavin Newsom crazy?
Well, I think he just grew up in an environment where government was the only option, right? Nancy Pelosi, he was backed by Getty, and he has always wanted to be president. So he's got more ambition than brains, and that's a dangerous thing. The people who George Washington didn't want to be president, and that's why he was a good person to be president.
Right.
But as you know, in the last, between January 2022 and June of 2024, California only created 5,400 jobs. Why was that? Well, look at the fact that the minimum wage went to $20. And what happened? We lost 6,000 jobs in the fast food industry. Wow. What does the law of demand say? We're price sensitive. The more something costs, the less of it you get. So we're getting less employment and businesses are leaving. I know you're friends with Andy Pudsner, and they stopped during his presidency of that group. They stopped opening up new restaurants in California because they saw long-term debt, high labor costs, pushed by government, not by the economy. So I think Newsom thinks that the best thing he can do is run on the left. By the way, you know what the biggest lie from Pelosi about if the Democrats had only had a primary, maybe they could have won this time around. If they had had that primary, all the Democrats would have run to the left. They would have been on record as to how radical they are, and they would have lost even worse.
Yeah, and as it was, they picked the most liberal senator in America. So it was an amazing election. I'm expecting big things. Tom Del Beccaro, thanks so much for taking some time on your Saturday afternoon. Very much appreciate. The book is The Lessons of the American Civilization. Folks, when we come back, we will spend the next 20 minutes taking your calls about December 7th and also about how we can get this government debt under control. What is your advice for DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency? This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. We're having a lot of fun today, but we're also having a remembrance of December 7, 1941. Today is December 7, 2024, and this is a day that will live in infamy, as President Roosevelt so correctly pointed out. And so I didn't live through that era, but my parents talked about it all of the time, about how it changed everyone's lives forever. For that generation, and it was the greatest generation. Tom Brokaw wrote a great book called The Greatest Generation. So asking folks about that, but also asking folks about what you think about DOGE, and do you think they can pull this off? And what is the recommendation that you have for how they can cut government spending? I've had a bunch of emails, people saying, let's get rid of whole agencies that are not needed, like the Department of Education, which does nothing to improve our schools. I don't know, do we need an urban development agency? Look what's happened to our urban areas. I don't see them making any difference. Look at what's happened to San Francisco. Look at what's happened to Los Angeles. Look what's happened to Seattle. Look what's happened to Philadelphia. Look what's happening in so many great cities. My home city of Chicago. It's been ruined by progressivism. I don't see HUD, Housing and Urban Development, doing anything to solve these problems. So let's stop spending money on these things that do not work. I prefer, when it comes to education, just give the money to the parents. Give it money to if you're a parent and you're a low income and your kids are stuck in a failing school district, then you should be able to get a grant voucher from the government and send your kids to a Catholic school or a Christian school or a Jewish school or a Montessori school or any school that works. Pods, a lot of parents could get together and they could teach the kids better than the teachers unions do. So a lot of options there. Okay. We got a lot of callers, so I'm going to get right down to it because I promised I would take as many callers as I could. We are live. All the other stations are infomercials, boring stuff. We're live in color. And I'm so proud of the fact that we have so many brilliant people who call in every week. So let us get right down to it. Mr. Producer, let's go to Lauren from New Jersey.
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
Hi. Well, first of all, I think I speak for all of us that you and your guests and your show is so top notch, and
Woo!
I think we all look forward to it.
Well, you know what? I'll send you the $1 for saying that. No, that is so nice. It makes my day. I appreciate it, Lauren. Very, very nice of you to say. I'm new to this game. I've never done this before, but I have a ball doing it, and I love doing it because I get to talk to people like you. So, what do you have any family remembrances of December 7th?
Well, I do because my dad fought in World War II. He entered the Army when he was 17.
Oh my God!
And yes, and he spoke French, so he saw a lot of action over there. And actually,
where was he?
I have to get all the details because he was invited down to Washington for a special ceremony with other veterans.
Oh my gosh!
I have to get all the details. He never spoke of it. Just like
I know, my dad didn't either. It's so interesting about that generation. But my dad was in the Pacific on a warship, and he almost never talked about it. Because that generation just felt like they did their duty.
Yes, so amazing, such amazing people. And what I was so touched with was he went to visit family in France and Belgium in the mid-1980s. And when the town and neighbors heard that he was visiting and they learned that, they came out in droves.
Oh my God!
Thanking him for liberating them.
Oh my God, that almost brings tears to my eyes. Seriously, what a great story! Amazing! And that was in Belgium.
Yes.
What country was that?
Belgium and in France.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. What a sweet story. Did your dad?
Yes, thank you.
And so then your dad came back, and then what did he do for a living?
He was an engineer. Yes, and unfortunately, he did suffer from PTSD. At night,
my uncle did too.
At night sleeping, he'd be thrashing around, screaming, like shoot him, shoot him. I mean, it was terrifying.
To have lived through that, I don't know how they did it. I really don't. It's amazing. Now, I just got a minute left, Lauren. Any ideas for how we can save money?
Well, your callers and you have had, and your guests have had such amazing ideas. I would just like to say, get rid of funding NPR. And
yes.
And I would like to see an agency put in place, because I never hear about this, and I feel it should definitely be stressed. An agency should be put in place to save these poor children who are being put into the sex industry, sex slaves.
Sick.
You know that over 325,000 children have disappeared that have come over the border, and this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, Steve. And no one is talking about it. And we need to address this.
Yes.
And I think we all need to thank God that He saved Donald Trump. Donald Trump will save our country and the world. And Steve, thank you so much.
Lauren, thank you very much for the great call. And, I know Tom Homan very well. I'm trying to get Tom to come on the show. He's a good friend of mine, and I've tried to get him the last 3 weeks. And God love the guy. He's always, he's at the border. I mean, he's literally working 20 hours a day on this stuff. He's an incredibly important American, and we will get him on, I promise. He is the border czar that actually is going to control the border, unlike the last border czar that we had that never even went to the border. I think Tom hasn't even been put in place yet, and he's been to the border about 10 times, and so it is. But we're going to get him on, I promise that, because he's a hero of mine. Great call, Lauren. Let us go to Kevin in Boston.
Hello there, Steve.
Hi, Kevin. You're calling from Boston.
Boston, and I'm actually right here at Rose Wharf, and I can see where, over at Griffin's Wharf, today Intercontinental, where it began in December of 1773, when they were fed up with the socialist system, and it just wasn't the crown's taxes of King George. It was over the socialization that they were feared, the colonists, and they came out in droves. But on the solemn day, as we recognize, I'm still young enough to remember that it was brought up to our schools. We started out with the Pledge of Allegiance, and as this day, Pearl Harbor Day, the 3,000 lives that were lost. And it's my hats off to all those families and just people. And I go back to, on the paternal side, was my grandfather that was in the Great War. He was in the trenches of the Great War, and Steve, a lot of people do not know this. Before armistice was signed, the 11th month, the 11th day, on the 11th hour, the first truce of the Great War of most lives ever cost was on Christmas Eve, just before, when one of the brave soldiers walked across enemy lines with the Christmas tree.
Oh, that's an amazing story. Amazing story.
They put the guns down and all. But how about jumping on to Doge? Here we are. I'm in one of the bluest states of the nation. You've mentioned so many. And we need more batters like your caller Tom and others that are there.
We sure do. Well, Kevin, I appreciate your listening to our show all the way in Boston. Great stories. These are fantastic. I mean, this is why I love to open up the lines, because really heartwarming stories. I love that very much, and appreciate your being a regular listener of the More Money Show. Folks, we're going to try to squeeze in a couple more if we may. I think, do we still have Morris from New York?
I am here.
Yes. Is that Morris?
It's Maurice.
Hi.
How are you, Steve?
Good. Thank you for calling in. Sorry to keep you waiting, but
okay.
What have you got for us today, Morris?
Well, I got a couple things. My father-in-law was a paratrooper in World War II in the South Pacific. It was an interesting story. He went to basic training in Georgia, and he experienced a lot of anti-Semitism down there. So he was walking around the base one day, and he saw a cool-looking guy in a great pair of shiny boots. And he says to the guy, "What do you do?" He says, "I'm a paratrooper in the South. I'm going to the South Pacific." So my father-in-law enlisted to be to be a paratrooper in the South Pacific. And here's a guy born in 1923, one of the toughest guys I've ever known, but one of the sweetest guys I've ever known.
Wow.
And he's jumping out of airplanes in the South Pacific with hand grenades, throwing them into caves. And then as he's jumping out of airplanes, he would see some of his friends in the planes drowning in the sea behind him.
Just incredible. I mean, these are incredible acts of heroism. It is. I mean, I can't even imagine doing something like that. And we have to remember and appreciate and honor people like that. It's what an amazing story. I mean, it is really breathtaking what these folks did. And then, as I said, they came back and they got on with their lives after they saved the world. How many times has America had to do that? I think about people like my grandfather, who actually came from Ireland in the early 1900s. And then he no sooner gets here to the United States that they send him overseas back to Europe to fight in World War I, which he did valiantly, although he lost use of one of his arms. And then he comes back, is married, has 4 kids, and 3 of his sons then are sent back to Europe for World War II, which he was terrified of because he had seen the horrors of war. And luckily, they all came back, but 2 of them did really suffer from the effects of the war and the trauma that it caused. But it's amazing. It's amazing what people went through. Now, Morris, before I let you go, do you have any ideas about how we can cut the budget?
Well, listen, I hope Elon and Vivek do a fantastic job, but unless this country touches entitlements, we're in big trouble.
Yes.
And I don't.
That's right.
I don't believe we can cut the benefits of anybody currently taking. But if you're 20 years old and 30 years old, I mean, when they passed the Social Security Act in 1933, I mean, the average life expectancy was 65. Now, for a lot of people, it's 80, it's 85, it's 90. Many people living to 100. Nobody anticipated collecting Social Security for all those years.
40 years.
It's got to gradually increase to age 70, unless the Social Security trust funds are going to go bust in 2033 or 2034. If they don't touch that, we're all dead. And there's not a politician out there, including Donald Trump, who I adore, will have the guts to do it.
Great point, Morris. Great call. Thank you very, very much for your insights. I want to give you a little bit of a different perspective, folks, on the Social Security issue, because I have a new video that just came out on, many of you are probably familiar with PragerU. That's Dennis Prager's shop, and they put out these great 3 or 4 minute videos. And you should, I'm sure most of you probably visited PragerU, but if you haven't, pull down these videos. They're fantastic. Well, I just finished one, and by the way, we've already had several million views on it. And I've talked about how what we ought to do with Social Security is move towards a system where every young person under the age of 40 would be able to take 10% of their paycheck each month, and another 2% would go into funding existing Social Security. But for that 10%, they would put it into a 401k plan, which is real savings, real investment. And that 401k plan would just be an index fund of all the stocks in America. So you're not picking winners and losers. You're just an index fund, by definition, is every stock. You own a small part of every company in America. And if we had done this 40 years ago, when the Dow Jones was started, when I started working, the Dow Jones was 1,000. Today it's 45,000. And I've calculated, because I'm 64, when I retire next year, I'll get maybe $2,200 a month in benefits. If I had had this option, I would be getting a benefit of about $15,000 to $20,000 a month, not $2,200 a month. So I think we have to let every young worker out of this system. Social Security is a terrible, terrible deal for young people. I have 3 kids and 3 sons and 2 stepsons that I want to get the best deal for as possible. And I think it is insane to tell them that they have to pay into this system 12% of their paycheck from the time they start working, and then they can't even retire to 70, 71, 72. I think that should be the decision of every person. I'm very much a libertarian. I want the government out of the way. And I know a lot of my listeners are older folks. I know the demographic. Many of you may be on Social Security. I'm not talking about cutting your Social Security benefits. I think we made a promise to you, and we should honor that promise, but we should get a better deal for young people. And we should have done this in the first place. This is the way the Social Security system should have run. Mr. Producer, we've got about 2 minutes left. Do we have time to squeeze in one more caller?
Yes, let's go to Stu from Brooklyn.
Stu, you are our last caller of the day. We don't have a lot of time. I appreciate you calling. What have you got for us?
Real quick, I was on the bridge of USS Boxer at the height of the Cuban crisis, and the officer up there who was commanding the Expeditionary Force Squadron told the story about leaving his ship December 7th, 1941 at 6 a.m. with prisoners for the brig going to Fort Island. And the young Marine guarding the prisoners was another young Marine lieutenant. The admiral I was talking to was George Pickard, and the young Marine was the general commanding the Expeditionary Force. And the ship they left was USS Arizona. That's why they survived.
Oh my God! What an amazing story, sir. Now, what about you? Were you did you serve in the military?
Yeah, I'm a lieutenant commander.
Thank you.
Command of Plan 34 Alpha, an 80-foot Norwegian Nasty class motor torpedo boat.
Well, saluting you, sir, on December 7, 2024. It is a day that we always have to remember. And never again are we going to be weak. We're going to be strong. Donald Trump is going to rebuild our military. We're going to have peace through strength, because when you're strong, you don't have people shooting at you and blowing up your towns, as happened in World War II. We will always remember the amazing people who fought and served our great country. And right now, oh, by the way, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.